Well, hey man, it's a long time no see. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Ah, I'm doing good, man. Thanks for having me. This is cool.
Good, man.
This is
Yeah,
my
it's very
first time to
cool.
do something like this.
Well, there's always a first one, but I think you have the advantage that you have been sort of in the spotlight for such a long time that this should be just a walk in the park for you.
Oh yeah.
Well, Casey, we go back a long time. Maybe it's been perhaps 20 years since we have known each other, and obviously there has been a huge gap there in between. Both of our lives have sort of drifted into very different directions. Uh, Can you just, for the listeners, can you just sort of, tell them, what it is that you're doing now?
So right now I'm the managing partner here at Yellow Dog Studios, um, and we're celebrating our 30th year as a studio. So I started the studio, or started this part of my life back in I don't know, probably 2018 or so, and I just moved to pretty much sold everything I had, moved to Wimberley, and I was still playing bass professionally on the road, touring and stuff. And when I was home, I was sleeping in the back of the studio on the couch, and I would, you know, be Dave's intern, which meant, you know, making coffee, fixing the sink, recording a band, learning all that. So fast forward to now, and many hours later of recording and mixing and, all that stuff. Now I'm managing a commercial studio in San Marcos, Texas. So,
All right on, man. Congrats.
thank you. It's been quite the
Yeah,
journey.
yeah, I can imagine. That's the idea. I want to take you back along that long road. I can imagine. So obviously, we go back a long time, and the way that we know each other is that we went to school together, we played football together, and obviously there's a lot of memories there. And something that I'm pretty interested in talking about is, okay, so from the guy that I once knew, if we can call it that, he was just a country boy, with
Yeah.
a crew cut, or just a regular old boy, from West Texas. So, talk to me a little bit about how was that you found this calling in music?
You know, I've been thinking about it since we talked about doing the podcast. And, you know, it's interesting because my family wasn't super musical. I mean,
Hmm.
we listened to a lot of music, but there was no, we had a piano in the house, but it was out of tune. And, it was like just a shelf basically. Um, and I learned to play. I remember it was before we played Alpine, speaking of playing ball together, because I got my first guitar that Thursday. So we got off early
Holy shit.
practice, drove to McCamey, bought my first real guitar, and I was excited to play it. And that following game, I got my ring finger hung in a face mask, and it was all swollen up, so couldn't play chords. But, ever since then, I just always wanted to play music. And I went to college, and every time we had a downtime, it was like couldn't wait to get together and play music, whether it was just jamming on the porch or, finally getting a gig, trying to go play for somebody that paid. But we were happy just playing music in the living room, in the, somebody's backyard. And I met a guy in college, and it was like, we need to start a band. He was a great fiddle player. So we started that Dick's Hat band, that first band. And, uh, man, after that, it was never a question of like, oh, this is, someday I want to be a professional musician. It was just something that we had to do. So every job I had was something that I could just walk away. I mean, I'm standing here with a college degree, and I could do a lot of things, but I just kept working these crappy jobs that I was not afraid to like quit, just to play music. So there's never been a defining like, aha, this is what I'm doing. It's just something that I felt the urge to do.
Hmm.
Now it's been 20 years and I look back, and it's not all I know how to do, but there's been a lot of things learned along the way, but there's always that drive to play music, and be it still enjoy playing on a back porch, for nobody, at some dive bar. And past year, I got to go to California, play with some guys, and there's 1,000 people in every crowd, but that's
Wow.
as much fun as it is to just go, play down the street. So it's something that as soon as I found it, it was like an obsession, you know?
Wow. Wow, that's amazing.
which was
Yeah,
interesting
that's
because I didn't do that in high school. I mean, we played after football. That was it. It was like, go play guitar, but man, we were terrible.
well, you gotta start somewhere, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, from the other chat that we had, you mentioned to me that you went to college, you got a degree in what was it, wildlife, animal
Yeah.
wildlife?
Wildlife
Yeah,
biology. Yeah.
yeah. So whenever you chose that career, well, I mean, I want to just sort of like take those two things apart. So what was it that sort of led you into the direction of wildlife biology?
I promised my parents I would go to college, and
Hmm.
at the time, I think everybody that I talked to that was, because there was maybe engineering,
Hmm.
but I wasn't really sure. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but
Okay.
wildlife seemed fun. I was like, well, that's cool. I can go
Hmm.
manage a ranch or something like that, take care of their deer population. And West Texas A&M had a wildlife degree. I didn't really know what that entailed. I kind of jumped into it blind, honestly.
Okay.
Um, and I was able to get a scholarship for it. Through the Barnsley Foundation, and it's an
Mm.
agricultural scholarship. But wildlife, they do so much land management as far as the natural ecosystem and working with cattle ranchers and farmers on how they can live in harmony with the environment. And so it was an easy spin. So I got the scholarship, and when I got into it, it was fun. It's kind of funny
Hmm.
because, man, don't tell any of my clients, but sorry, but I love producing music, but just something about being stuck inside all day. The
Yeah.
studio we had in Wimberley had floor to ceiling windows all the way across it, and it was great until the neighbors started cutting trees down with a chainsaw, and you're trying to cut an acoustic guitar, But otherwise, you get to look outside, be part of nature. And now, I have to spend a lot. I have to intentionally go out and hike and run just to, you know, get out of the room. I remember doing manual labor thinking, man, I can't wait to have a desk job.
Hmm.
Now that I have a desk job, I'm like, man, I can't wait to go outside.
Mm.
But,
100%. Uh-huh.
so I went from a degree which playing music professionally was kind of a lot like that. You're riding around with a bunch of smelly people in a van, and you're just driving across the country. So wildlife biology, band manage, playing in a band, it's all the same.
Yeah, you're with a bunch of animals, right?
Totally. Man, they used to give me hell. Like we'd be driving by Playa Lake in the panhandle of Texas or the Midwest, and I'm like looking for birds in the ponds. And they're giving me shit by the end of the trip, that I got the guys identifying birds all over the
Oh
place.
shit.
So,
That's cool. I mean, is there any parallels that you have found between, well, the education that you got versus, being in a band, producing music? I mean, is there anything that are you able to connect it, or is it two complete opposite poles?
um, they're pretty opposite poles, but there's a lot of like life lessons there. It's like
Hmm.
to get through college and academia, like you have to show up. If you're
Yeah.
tired and if you're tired, hungover, kind of sick, just in a bad mood, like you have to show up and you have to finish what you start or you fail, right?
Hmm.
And I learned how to learn in college, and then you apply that to music, and in music, I mean, you have to constantly study, you know.
Hmm.
In both fields, you have to really be creative. You know, I mean, when I was in college, you're surrounded by all academics all the time, doing research in the field, either students or your peers. And so you get used to a certain vernacular. I went to a wedding a while back from a guy I went to school with, and a couple of them have PhDs now. A few of them went on to get their masters. And we're all talking, and they start using these abbreviations for the Latin terms of all these critters that they've left me a long time ago. So, in the same, all I'm surrounded with most, my girlfriend, she's a musician. Everybody I work with they're all
Is music.
musicians. So
Yeah.
whenever I play with or when I go hang with people that have, normalist jobs, it's funny because, I mean, I don't know, you're just consumed in it all the time. So there's a lot of parallels in both worlds. They're kind of extreme, I think, too. People are like, you studied snakes? Like, only good snakes are dead snake, kind of thing. It's like, you what? You play bass? I don't know what's worse, wrangling snakes or playing bass, but
Yeah, yeah, of course. And it also depends where those people that you're talking to are from. Like whenever you
absolutely.
talk to somebody that's not from Texas and you sort of talk about the things that you lived through, they look at you like you're some kind of fucking strange person. Like, like, are you serious about those things? So, yeah, I mean, it's just normal life there. It's West Texas life. Uh, you talk a little bit about the hours and the dedication that you have to sort of put in, whether it's pursuing a degree or, playing music. Where did that come from for you?
I guess just watching my dad work. My parents
Mm-hmm.
divorced when I was like 11 or 12. Then I moved with my dad to Fort Stockton and back. And he always, like, he was a police officer for a while, but he was always building houses and working on something.
Mm-hmm.
And so from the time I can remember, I went to every job with him. He didn't have a
Wow.
babysitter. He was like, come on, son, like, here's some wooden blocks. I never had a hard time entertaining myself with that. So I think part of it was just seeing him work hard.
Mm-hmm.
He'd stay up late, eating with the family and hanging out, watch TV, and he'd go down the shop and work, and then get up before everybody and go, you know, run wells, pump wells for a company, and then go build a house. So I always had a lot of inspiration, I guess, from that. Maybe,
Mm-hmm.
but mainly just there's things that I want to accomplish, and I feel like he instilled a work ethic in me. And now, as I've gotten older and matured, I think there's a drive to that, and I feel really fortunate that I haven't lost my interest in music. Like, it's still fun, because touring can be tough, but it's addicting. I mean, COVID was weird for the whole music industry, but
Mm-hmm.
it kind of puts things into perspective as far as getting too involved. I think when you obsess over something, it's easy to work hard. If you have a little bit of drive, speaking of Coach Daggy, I mean, dude, we both played ball together. I think competitive sports are incredible for kids to learn how to work hard and get beaten, learn how to work hard and win, but do it with, you know, grace and class, um, and reap the benefits of pain. It's good to hurt a little bit, and taking a lot of that into the music business. I mean, the music game is something, if you don't love it, I mean, you can dabble in it part-time, but to do it full-time, you just have to love it, because it can be pretty grueling at times. I mean, you put a lot of hours in, and sometimes it doesn't come back financially.
Mm-hmm.
But the drive for me is always the project. It's like we're making art, we're creating something out of nothing that can invoke emotion and make you feel things. And it's powerful, man.
Yeah.
You know, I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
you go to, there's certain countries that ban music, because it's powerful, you know. We're pretty damn lucky, as crazy as things are. It's like, we have a microphone in here that we bought from Ukraine right after Russia invaded. And
Shit.
a missile went through into the building and destroyed their control room, took out their console and their grand piano and just some random gear. So they took everything else they could down to the train station underneath the building, and they were just like kind of waiting it out. And so they were selling a bunch of stuff on this site called Reverb, where you can buy and sell, gear. And so Dave ordered it and talked to the guy on the phone, and they were just trying to sell enough gear to get enough money to go to Warsaw so they could start a new studio to go
Oh,
make
shit.
art. While they're dodging missiles, they're like, man, they just be a random barrage come in. There's no rhyme or reason. And I mean, this was over a year ago, but it's a fantastic microphone. Of course, it's got the European plugs on it, so we have a step up transformer that we plug it into to use it. I mean, but it's hard to imagine that. I mean, what all's been saying into that microphone. Um,
Yeah. Now that if you put it that way, obviously, what if you put it in a way that what the microphone has been through, what it has heard, what it has recorded, bombs
mhm.
dropping, whatever it may be, it sort of adds a little bit more character, right?
It really does.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. So
it,
go ahead.
no, no.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned a lot you were talking about the influence that Coach Dege had on us, but the hard work ethic, that what football gave us as kids, is sort of that drive. And I couldn't agree with you more, 100%. And those are some of the things that we sort of discussed whenever I was talking to Coach Dege. And I talked to him a little bit about what is the back engineering of the things that he did with us, how he did it, and what was the main purpose of it. And of course, as a kid, all you see it as somebody just busting your ass for a good reason. But then talking to him and sort of finding out what are the good reasons behind those things was like a really eye-opener. It was incredible to sort of take myself back again and be able to learn a lot more just from having a conversation versus him being a coach for us for 3 years. It's pretty crazy. And a lot of the lessons that were learned, it's basically a lot of understanding the concept of tough love. They put us through hell, and that sort of built some calluses in our mind, if you want to put it that way, to sort of be able to go through difficulties after high school, becoming a young man. Becoming a man, transitioning from a young man to a man, it's obviously it can be quite conflicting or confusing for some. And without those fundamentals that we were able to get from sports, maybe we wouldn't be at the place where we are. It seems to me, obviously, in your case, you had your father, to look up to, maybe your big brother as well. And then you also have like this group of coaches that were also pushing you and sort of making you realize what potential you had within you. And did that sort of serve as a stepping stone for you to take on any challenge? I mean, it seems to me that whatever it was that you may have chosen to pursue, most likely you would have been successful at it or good at it, if you want to put it that way.
Man, well, thank you for saying that. And I mean, you're right. I feel fortunate that music is something I'm very passionate about. But I laugh sometimes. I think had I applied this much work and effort and hours into any other career, I would probably be retired right now. I could fly out. We could do this in person, right? Yeah. But man, I can't wait to listen to that interview with you and Dagi, man. When I speak, like I had my father and of course my older brothers, and we're all half siblings. Like my family, it's pretty weird family tree there. But it's cool. It's mine. It's fine. We all love each other, and it's like everybody's got their thing, right? You got a very fascinating story. I can't wait to hear more about that. But
Absolutely.
So, but the first time I walked into the field house, Coach Dagi was in there, and it may have been Coach Anderson, right? That's another great man and coach. And he goes, "Hey, I think this was right before the Pac thing came about, right? This was a few days before Pac was signed." And he said, "Oh, so you're Jason Johns' little brother, right?" And that's my oldest brother, and he was like a really good linebacker, and then went on to be a coach, and yeah. So I'm not him, obviously,
Yeah.
But he walks in there. "So you Jason Johns' little brother?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Man, you don't even deserve to wash his dirty jockstrap. Get the hell out of here." So that was it. Called me into the office to tell me that, and they kicked me out. I was like, okay, all right.
Yeah. They were known to do shit like that all the time. They just call you in for something silly and they like get you out of there.
Freaking Anderson always knew when I had to try to get some snuff in my lip, and he'd walk by and just, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that is very cool. I mean, obviously times now are a little bit different, and we touched base on when I was asking him. I said, obviously, as a young man, a lot of the guys were maybe going through some stuff, whether it may be existential or maybe the family situation wasn't the best. And I asked him, I said, did you have a good idea of what the guys were going through in their personal lives? And surprisingly, they said, yeah. I said, yeah, we knew 100%. The good thing about Crane was that it's a very small community, so everybody talks. So especially when you're in a successful program like the one that we had, that everybody talks. If you're doing something bad, we know. If you're doing something great, we knew. We knew when you were having trouble. And that is the reason why we tried to create it. We really wanted to create an environment where, at least for a while, those things could sort of disappear for a while and give you some sort of purpose and hope that life wasn't as tough as it may be for the moment. And looking back on that, it's, it really is that way. Obviously, even though we went to high school together, even though we may have had some classes together, you don't really get to know the other person, like really to like the full extent. I mean, now, you telling me these things that your parents were divorced. I had no idea. I didn't know that you had two brothers. I mean, I knew of Dustin.
Yeah.
But I didn't know of your older brother. So there's like, it seems to me like each and every one of us, had and has this crazy or wonderful story behind everything that we were showing up at that particular moment, which is pretty fucking crazy if you think about it.
It really is. And I never even considered that outlook from Dagi saying that about creating that environment, because, we're all showing up together as a team. But like you said, there's that whole underlying story. I mean, there's so much about, your story that, hell, I didn't know till we caught up the other day. It's been 20 years. But every memory I have of you and all the guys is great. And it had a huge impact on me personally through, like you said, through my journey into college, into music, now into producing. And that moment, I had a conversation with a guy yesterday I can tell you about in a minute along those lines. But I thought being a music producer, you had to be a musical savant. I had to be able to compose all this music. But as I got into it, I realized I'm just the coach and those are the players. And so if I have the budget to hire to do a certain thing, then I'll hire certain players and tell them what I want them to do and let them perform. When I have a band come in, I get to work with the band to do pre-pro and kind of help them along through the music aspect of it, but more importantly, the emotional and the psychological aspect of it. Because, the red light fever, these guys get nervous, or some need the tough love, some need to be taken aside from everybody in the group and be like, hey, this is what's going on. And sometimes I'll take a guy and say, hey, you need to quit talking to your drummer. If you need to tell him something, you tell me and I'll tell him, okay? Because I can see that there's, when he says something, even though the drummer knows he's right, it's because it came from him that he's like, no, I'm not going to, But it's all just little shit like that I learned from playing ball with you guys because of Dagi and the environment they created. There's guys that were not going to be able to call audibles and do that, but they can hit hard. And so we put them in a position where they can succeed. There's guys that only played on kickoff, and dude, how many turnovers did we have? It's because we got them hyped, because everybody's role was important to make that machine work, right? And, Dave, my sensei that taught me this, that got me in the position I'm in now, I bought into the studio from him, and he's been here guiding me through this whole process. And he's cancer free now. That's been a health journey, but he compared everything to a watch. If you zoom out of a situation and you look at everybody involved, if you just take a minute and pause and zoom out, and you see all the gears turning, and you can see who's full of shit, you can see who's doing what, and how everybody, even the smallest of gear, has its role and its play. And those lessons from the early sports days, I mean, it truly was a place to escape, but more importantly, like, you're learning lessons you don't even realize at the time.
Yeah,
thinking back on the memories, I mean, there's times where it's like, damn, man, my foot's hurting, or man, I hit that, my head's ringing, I can't, like, whatever it may be. But, or you think about working out now, like, I go run because it frees my mind, and I know that it helps my body. I know why I'm doing things to train, but I feel like early on, it's hard to connect those dots. But when you have the coaches that are it wasn't even a thing. So you're just showing up for your teammates. You know, everybody listened to everybody. I feel like we supported each other really well.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times we listen to the instructions and we obey those instructions without really knowing the full underlining behind those instructions. And until, of course, obviously until 10, 15 years later, you obtain this behavior that is leading you in a positive direction. And well, simply the way it has worked for me, for example, is a lot of the things that I do are based or come from those fundamentals that I got from playing ball. You know, whether it may be, getting up in the morning to go train, working, or whatever it may be. And also being able to sustain challenges as well. Uh, Again, if you put things into perspective with the sports analogy, is that, well, in sports, you go through tough moments, you got to work hard, you got to bleed a little bit, but then all those things is just simply going to make you grow. And there's no growing without stress, without pain, right? So those are things that I look back on and sort of thank that I was able to have that opportunity and to also play along guys like you and the other ones. Now, obviously, all these things have had a huge impact on yourself and on your development. So shifting over a little bit to the music part. Now, I know that you got into this band, Dixie Band. So talk to me a little bit about that project. How is it that it was born, and what was your experience during that?
So that really, like, Justin King helped me learn to play guitar in high school. And then, we got done playing ball, and I just kind of dove into that. And then I got to college. I met this guy, Adam, and he played fiddle, and he had a band, and I kind of had a shitty band. And we're in Arizona at the time, and just outside of Douglas, Arizona. We're sitting around the campfire, and I didn't really know anybody in college at the time. Garrett McNeese, a few of those Crane guys went up there, but it was kind of later into my time there. So they'd kind of moved on, and I was talking to Adam, and he's like, man, we should jam when we get back. We're both kind of linked up, and we're the crazy guys that would catch the snakes or, dive down the hill for whatever, and we got back to Texas, and we got together and jammed, and I realized, like, man, okay, so Justin's taught me guitar and got me into that dream, and I met Adam, and he taught me music and taught me that, okay, we can actually do this. I heard, he's trained classically with the Suzuki method on fiddle, so he had amazing ears, and his band was way better than my band, but we kind of merged them all. And members came and went, Jim Clack, shout out to in Crane, he left the band and got into the Navy, bro. And we had a guy get out of the Navy and join the band that went to school with Adam. It was like this whole weird, just people from Crane and Dumas, Texas were coming in and out of that early project. But the whole time I was like, I had learned music then, and that was whenever it was like game over. This is what we're going to do. And, we both graduated together, and then we were like, let's go start a band, and I just had dreams of tour buses and sold out crowds. And the reality was gear in the back of a pickup driving to North Odessa to play some cinder block building for $150. Man. But it's funny how many people from Crane and Dumas, but yeah, that was, what a time.
Yeah, I can imagine. So this project, Dix Hat Band, you were playing what instrument?
I was playing bass. So
Bass.
I played electric bass and harmonica, and then eventually got the big stand-up double bass.
Yeah.
Which they would stand on.
Yeah. All right. So obviously, you're performing your own songs, right? Talk to me about the creative process of generating music. Obviously, like you mentioned, I think at that particular moment, you had maybe sort of a short period of time that you had learned, to play music. What was it like now shifting to the next sort of stage of your musical career to maybe start producing music? How did that happen? What's sort of your inspiration to for creativity?
For me personally, I usually start with kind of a melody or a riff idea, you know, or I mean, as a bass player, I'd always write in riffs, you know, I'd just be playing. I'd always had a good teacher one time tell me to, like, you can practice your skills in your form, but always leave time to create. Like, make more time to create than more time to practice your skills, right? Your dexterity's fine, but be creative with it. That's why we play. And so I would always think of it in riffs, and eventually, you know, in the early days when we were writing songs, we would sit out on the porch and write words and have a melody, and then you'd kind of craft the chords around the melody of the vocal. But now it can vary from somebody coming in. I had a client come in with just words, and we crafted the entire melody and the chord progression and stuff, but that's kind of done with the direction, like, you know, intention. But for me creatively now, I've got some singles I'm trying to release soon once I get them mixed. They kind of take a back seat, right, to everything that pays the bills, but I'll get those out. But for me, I like to I'll do like a voice memo. I'll be driving, you know, I love to drive and think, you know. Now I walk to work, it's wonderful, but I do sometimes miss those like long drives home, you know, alone to decompress. But I'll sing into my voice memos, you know, and if I have a cool guitar riff or something, I'll play that into my voice memos, and I can just drive and listen to that and start seeing what comes up, you know. But inspiration comes in a lot of forms. James Jamerson, one of my bass influences, one of the greatest, he played in all the Motown stuff. And in his book, he goes, or a quote by him in a book was talking about finding inspiration in the way the leaves blow in the trees and the waves crash in the ocean. And you're like, what is this fool talking about, dude? What is he even talking? Then I go join a band and we play. And after a little while, it's like, okay, you truly can be inspired. You know, it's like, just I do run a lot on the trails out here. And you know, that's where a lot of ideas come in. Kind of clears your brain. And the next thing you know, if I'm listening to a podcast or music, like, I won't even hear what's in my ears, but it's all cerebral at that point. And then I start creating. So come home and try not to forget it, you know?
Yeah, I guess that's the, I wonder how many unwritten melodies you have gone through your head that haven't made it to your instruments.
Man, if you looked at the notes in my phone, there's so many just random thoughts, you know. I'll read it some days, I'm like, that had to have had a cool melody because that makes no sense at all, you know?
Yeah, for sure. So, well, that's pretty interesting. I mean, I've always, I mean, obviously I'm not, or I don't know, I've never really explored my artistic side, but I've always been quite drawn to obviously to music, good music, obviously. And when I listen to good music at any particular moment, you know, whether it is I'm feeling sad or I'm feeling very happy and the right song just happens to come on that sort of speaks to you, we sort of step back and wonder, it was like, you know, what it was that they were feeling at that particular moment when they were generating this melody or those lyrics, you know, because there's some of those songs that you listen for the first time, maybe it's some unknown artist, and then they just fucking hit you like a ton of bricks, right? So I can imagine you must have some of those moments as well where you're just, I don't know, maybe you're going through something good, great, that sort of inspires a different style of melody, or just sort of gives you like a new light into your creative process. Now, you talked a little bit about touring the country. I suppose from the point whenever the project started and then eventually started giving fruit, you started becoming, is it famous? Is that the correct thing to say? When you started to become famous, what did that do to you? I mean, how did you manage that, or what was your experience with it?
I feel like it was always easy for me to stay relatively humble, kind of in part because, like, and I warn young artists of this all the time, is getting into it, it's easy to look up the ladder and be like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, that was cool. So we got our first paying gig. Okay, well that's better, And then after that, it's like, well, now we got new gear, we got a trailer, we have every weekend booked out for the rest of the month. Okay, that's cool. Oh, now we're quitting our jobs and we're making money and we're gigging full time. Okay, that's cool. But you're looking at the next level and you're like, well, they're in a van. I want a van. I'm tired of driving in a pickup truck, Instead of being like, man, we just quit our jobs and music is what we do full time.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a few moments like that, and then it's like, oh, well, now we sold out the local bar, now we're number one on the radio and it's playing our song on the radio. That was an exciting experience. A few members, it got to their head and it can cause problems, the
Mm-hmm.
ego, if left unchecked. Sometimes you see young artists fall into that trap and you can't fault them for it. You just got to see how they get up, Like one thing all that shit's taught me is, dude, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to eat shit sometimes in front of people, especially when, start selling stuff out and say the wrong thing or, it's singer hooks up with the wrong chick, and it's like, oh, well, she was actually in fact married. That did, and that kind of
Shit.
stuff would happen. And so a lot of my job was putting out fires. I kind of took a natural role, trying to like manage the band. I think the drummer and I were the ones that were always kind of trying to drive it forward. And we were still partying, having a good time, but it was like so easy to get caught up in the next thing to really enjoy the moment of what you have and be grateful for, like, man, we just sold that place out.
Mm-hmm.
And in the moment, yeah, you try to live it up, but that's what I try to remind artists is like, dude, enjoy those little moments because in a week, it'll be less of a moment. In a month, it'll maybe even be a faint memory, or a year. And so like enjoy those because before you know it, you're going to get to the end of the road and realize that like, man, I've accomplished all these goals, but I didn't stop to relish in it a little, because you're always looking for the next thing, the next sellout crowd, the next bar, the next, venue to play or the next album. And so it's like, don't hate on your previous work. Just think of it as a stepping stone, but always enjoy that release. Like it's a lot of work to create something entirely out of nothing,
Mm-hmm.
thin air, and go in there and I don't know if you can, there's a session going on behind me right now. It's a
I can
jazz
hear.
trio. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
great guys, man. It's cool. They're cutting it all live to tape. It's fun, man.
Oh shit.
But, it's like they're creating something out of nothing. And that takes a lot of work, to compose 10 songs and say things like that make you feel something. I mean, some of this shit is because some of the best music we got are from tortured souls and they were able to get it out. And unfortunately, some of them it didn't help them in that process, but that was their gift to us as a society, as a world, and that's what we get to do. And so it's important that I try to remind these, especially the young players and even the old ones, like enjoy the moment, let it, like, I guess becoming famous, but it's like enjoy that, but don't get so hung up in the next step or, well, somebody's more famous than me or, play it down like it's not a big deal. Like when you start getting people that are listening, man, you know, that's a special feeling. So you got to enjoy it. But sit down, stay humble,
Yeah, 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 yeah. You mentioned something quite interesting that I've kind of, well, you notice it and you hear it, obviously, what from my perspective, whenever you watch a documentary on a musician or whenever you watch the story behind a great musician, and there's this quote that I think it's from a movie, I don't remember, but the point is that it's this famous photographer, and obviously he's quite miserable, and he sort of then says, well, I think they ask him about happiness, and he sort of responds like, like all great artists are miserable fucks, you know, and they create beautiful things because of that same misery. So, now that, I mean, now that you're an artist and you get an opportunity to sort of be able to talk and pick the brains of great artists, uh, do you think, how true is that? And if it is true, on the contrary, do you think beauty can also be created from a different mindset, from a different, you know, frame, for example, from happiness? I mean, obviously, if it comes from nothing, then it's probably not going to be a hit. It's probably not going to mean anything. We know that some of the greatest songs come from a lot of misery. But on the contrary, is it possible to also create something out of complete joy?
I think so. I mean, there's something to be said about like, it's hard when artists get super famous for a one project and they have a long career, and it's just they're constantly trying to live up to that one magic spark that happened. But the problem is like the martyr. Everybody remembers the martyrs and the ones that were tortured, and there's plenty of incredible art and art out there that is created from a happy place, and from a happy soul. But I think that some of the early records, like when you're young, there's this big thing of, well, if you hadn't made it by 25, then give up and quit, or whatever, like go get a real job, a day job. And, but I don't know that there's a Chris Christopherson quote where he says, you suppose you got to be a miserable son of a bitch just to write a good song every once in a while. And where I think part of that is true, not necessarily, it's just those are the ones who remember because that's it's the rock and roll in it. But as a young artist, you're also kind of like hedging all your bets on it. When you get older and mature, some things don't hurt as bad as they used to because you've already felt it, And so I think when you're young, you're angry and you got that fire in you and you're just pissed off at the world. Then you get older and you realize the rhythm of the world and your importance in it, how little, and how big your impact can be, but by doing little things. But as a young artist, I think what we love so much about those projects is that even if they may not be homeless, but I mean, whatever they're feeling is the worst thing they've ever felt in their life. They make it to 30, and they've definitely felt that before. They felt a few more pains and happiness and stuff. So I think something has to do with they're not rushed by the labels. They're not trying to put another one out for the fans. This is everything, all of their energy, everything they have is going into that one project. Once they get that one done, then the second one, I mean, they still are going to put their energy into it, but they're feeling the world different by then. Yeah. Especially if their first album was successful,
Yeah. Why do you think we gravitate sometimes towards those kinds of songs or those kinds of artists?
Man.
That is sort of...
I don't know. That's... Maybe because people want to, it's the same with like romance and love. Everybody loves a good love story. People want that, and they want that, and that's the extreme of it, man. The artists that live and die by their, they're just homeless because they can't function in any form but being an artist, and they don't want to. They just want to be. I mean, that's some of the more extreme versions of that, but maybe it's people want that and they're just too, I don't know, because you're not cowardice to live a normal life, it's like,
I don't know. Yeah.
It's fascinating, the psychology there. I mean, I work with artists that can go in there and you just give them a prompt and they'll write you a beautiful song about the prompt, and it's, and it feels good. But then there's people that come in and they just, even as a young person, they have an old soul, like their spirit, their souls lived somewhere before, experienced some shit, because, they'll play and it may have some imperfections in the take, but it's like
powerful.
Yeah, you get that feeling. Then you know that somebody's going to be crying in their car when they get home from work.
Yeah. Yeah. I suppose maybe, I don't know, I guess whether, like you mentioned, everybody loves a romance story, a love story. And also, on the contrary, sometimes whenever we go through those hard things, we maybe look for external things that are able to describe the feeling that we're having because we don't have any words. well, maybe some of us don't have the words to actually say exactly what we're feeling, but then somebody can put its magic into a guitar, into an instrument, into a few words to, rip their heart out or just go all the way down and like unravel the full side of pain that they're having that can sort of connect with other people, right? Because that's the beautiful thing about music. And, whenever I listen to it, whether it's a happy song or a joyful song or even a sad song, it also has to do a lot with the point of your life whenever you first heard that song. You listen to it. I mean, it doesn't matter how much time goes by. Sometimes you listen to it and it's like it takes you back to that same place. Something magical. I think, is that would you say, are those some of the rewarding things that you have found as an artist?
Absolutely. It's like you said, the melody and the memories that go with those, that feeling exists just playing the music, like to write a song and have a crowd sing it back to you is a direct, like, there's not a better drug in the world, I don't think, because those people connected with it,
Yeah.
And to be fair, like, our sad songs did better than our happy songs. I don't know what it is about the human psychology there, but there's a lot of people to have people come up and say, man, that song really resonated with me, or have an artist say, man, I sat in my driveway and I listened to that song and I went in there and I wrote this song and you inspired me. And and it's like, to be able to do that with words, because we were feeling things, and some of it was true. And some of the songs were kind of like, we had a truth, and how can we stretch it and tell the story, But I think the sincerity in the story is what makes people connect, The group that I was in after Dick's Hat Band, Garrett Bryan, he's an incredible songwriter, and just dude can paint a story, man. I left a rowdy kind of party band and then started a rock band, did some tours, and then I settled in with those guys, and he is a storyteller. So I went from like running around on stage and headbanging and sweating and stuff to playing these very, very poetic, heartfelt, emotional songs. And he would see and take inspiration from people. There's a story of some old man that lived in the town he grew up in that had gone crazy, and he would paint himself blue. And that was one of the, dude, it's hard not to just start crying on stage some nights. You're playing these listening rooms and you got all these people, you could hear a pin drop in there. And we're playing these sad, just songs about this guy's story. And it's a sad story. There's not a happy ending, and, but it's so beautifully done. But to be able to tell somebody's story and have people listen to it, they love the happy songs too, but man, that was an interesting transition to go from this kind of rowdy party band to, we're wearing jackets and we got respect, and where people listen to what you have to say. That's so in his instance, he used that fame in a very positive light, very sincere with his poetry and songs.
That's beautiful. Do you still recall the first time that the crowd sang back one of your songs?
It's probably in San Angelo or Lubbock. Yeah, we playing at the Blue Light, I think, and it was like close to sold out, and we had our song was like number one on the top 5 at 5 for several weeks in a row. And you're talking like 6 months prior to that, they wouldn't even play our shit on the radio, and they said, if y'all keep telling your fans to call in, we're gonna cancel. Like, we're just gonna throw your stuff in the trash. And we're like, guys, we're not telling them. So we did a public service announcement on our, I think Facebook was probably it. Maybe Twitter was out then, but it was like, please stop calling in. It takes a moment, they'll get to it. And sure enough, man, it took off like fire, and it was cool, unexpected. We didn't, and so that was one of the first times we were up there playing. We're like, you almost just stop playing. Like, what has happened? And since then it's just varying nights. We've played some pretty big shows, and 2 days later you're playing in some dump for nobody, and they're all fun. But yeah, that was a special moment. It was the first time that the crowd sang back, and then you can kind of work that into your show, And also the the funny part of when you expect them to sing back and they don't, and then you're kind of like, oh, okay, whatever. You're like, thanks for humbling me, folks.
Yeah, for sure. So, how do you like as a performer? Obviously, whenever you're going to be doing a gig, how do you choose what songs to start with and to close with? Like, how do you manage that roller coaster?
That's a fun one, man. To not be overly dramatic about it, but you know, Zach Wilkerson, fantastic artist. If you're not familiar with him, it's very bluesy. He's got laser pipes, if you will. But he's like compares it to making love with the audience, and so he'll go out there free form a lot and just kind of start with a couple standards that he normally plays and opens up with, kind of warm everybody up. And if they're feeling more listening room, he might do some deep cuts that are more emotionally, you got to really listen to the words. If it's kind of a rowdier crowd, maybe come out and let the band groove a little more. But it all depends on the band and the energy that you want to set in the room, which is a beautiful thing to be able to do that as a performer, as an entertainer, is to like take people on a journey. The early band, Dick Sat Band, I mean, we would come out of the gate swinging, man, just freaking shock them, do 2 or 3 songs. And then once we had their attention, we'd get emotional for a bit and play a couple songs we wanted them to really hear the lyrics on. And then by the end of the stage, end of the night, there's people climbing on the big bass and jumping onto tables and all that stuff. And that was a rowdy time. But like with Garrett and them, we'd do shows with an all a cappella opening to a love song. And there's a couple albums we did that were conceptual albums, and so they were designed to be listened to from front to back, and there's individual stories telling the whole story. And those are fun to work on and make. But we go out live and we would start off and our drummer would just shake a shaker and then stop, and they would just start singing, and we'd have 4-part harmonies. And at the time, we all had suit coats on, so we'd walk in, and sometimes we were playing some grungy bars, and you'd walk in there like that and just, and then we get up there, and if we were opening for somebody, man, we kind of upshowed them, because you show up looking sharp, and then just bust out a 4-part harmony to open the show and sing the whole first chorus like that. And then we just come in real soft and we start playing the show. And that was one of my favorite ways to open a show, because people, I mean, they're kind of noisy at first, but then they just stop. And it's so much more effective, just the human voice just singing in harmony. And then everybody stops and listens. And but after that, man, they're all in the palm of your hand. You can do whatever you want to.
Wow. That's crazy. Interesting to learn about those things. Which do you enjoy the most, or like which one did you feel you got the most back out of from the crowd?
There were some moments in each band that had their time, I think Dick's Hat Band probably had more consistency in that realm, just because we had, we were a team, it goes back to that team stuff before. I mean, we all had jobs, and as soon as those jobs were over, we all met up on, 7 p.m. every night, and we'd rehearse till, 10, 11, midnight, go back to our job. And that was the thing. And so that band had a lot of magic in it, and we caught fire. And so that was a lot more consistent crowd feedback. But man, there's been a lot of really beautiful moments in multiple bands I've been in. With Garrett and them, I kind of came in late, but even though I played on the last 3 albums that he did, but before that, it was kind of all him. And I love that, because then I could, me and the drummer, we were kind of introverts at the time. We just dip out, we get our show done, we could leave, and we go hang out with the band, just not having to go to the crowd. We're like Dick's Hat Band. I mean, we made it a point early on to go out and shake hands, buy people beers with our tab and shit like that. So we were making friends. So by the end of it, you had to go out and engage and do that. But it paid off, man. People buy in and believe it, and makes for a hell of a freaking show when you got half the people in the crowd just want to drink a beer with you,
Yeah. So eventually, after the career that you had with those bands, what was it that led you into the direction of wanting to produce?
I think I was probably like 31, 31, and I'd gone on a tour with this rock band and put my other project on hold for a month while we were out, which is fine. We didn't, we didn't have any gigs then anyway. And I worked with a band that didn't have any animosity, and the other guys I'd been with, some animosity built up as it does, I've actually reconciled with everybody since then, but it's, some of it took years to get over, but I needed a change. I wasn't happy. I'd been wanting to get out of Lubbock for like, several years at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Relationship had failed, and then the band broke up because the singer kind of got a big head, got the thinking he was Robert Plant and shit, It's like thought he was famous. And so all that kind of went south, and then it just slowly deteriorated from there. Mm-hmm. And so I needed a change, and one of the guys in the band had moved to Wimberley, and we had already done some projects down here. I loved the area, and him and our producer at the time were getting a house together. So I was like, shit, I'll just be y'all's roommate. I don't care. Let's go. And kind of sold everything I had except for some gear and some tools, and then moved down here. And that was whenever, when I landed, the house wasn't ready, and I spent several months living in the back of the studio. And literally by chance, I decided like I was kind of interested in recording, but I didn't have any experience other than just playing on records. And driving to dinner one day, Dave was like, I need an intern, bro. And so I started. He showed me how to clean the tape machine, and that was off to the races, man. 9 months later, I'm at Abbey Road Studios in London tracking with Dave,
Shit.
So
tell me about that. How was it that you ended up in London? Was it Liverpool?
Yeah, it's London. And Dave had been going over there for like 20 years working there. He was actually the second producer not affiliated with a major label to ever work at Abbey Road, because before he had to be with EMI. I think it was EMI. But it was surreal as hell. I mean, that year that I went, I was still playing bass on the road, and I just got done on a tour with Garrett, and then we went out to Key West, played the Mile Zero Festival, and then toured our way through the Carolinas and back home. And then a week later, I jumped on a plane and flew to London, and then COVID happened. We almost got stuck there. Yeah, if we got him, I'll tell you the crazy story. That one was so we get there first off, and we walk across the crosswalk, because you got to do it, right? The famous Beatles crosswalk.
Yeah.
And so we walked across there, and it's just in this old neighborhood, all these giant mansions, And we walk in, and it was pretty surreal. All the movie posters and the band posters on the walls and shit, and the place is huge. And we get into the studio, and we get to work, and next thing you know, it's like, okay, it's just another studio. We're working. It's all good. Then you walk back out in the hallways. It's like, oh my God, there's a bar downstairs, and London was cool. I really enjoyed London. And so we had just finished up first round of the project, and we were getting ready to go to round 2. So we're there for about a week. I think we had 2 more weeks left, and Dave and I had been up all night kind of celebrating. So we're drinking whiskey, and we had a flat rented. He was there so frequently that he just kept a flat, and it was like a small 3-bedroom, top of the building, corner window. You could see across London. It was really cool. And so we're just hanging out, drinking. I remember walking through the rain to go get another bottle, because we were like, it's still early. Let's go, get back. And wake up at 4 a.m. Our phones are going, haywire, man. And it's like, oh, everybody's shutting down flights from Europe, except for the UK. And so I hear them shuffling around, him and his wife, Jamie, jump up, and I go in there, and he's like, pack your bags, man. We're getting out of here. So we're changing the flights and call the Uber, and we're in this Uber with this big-ass Russian dude who didn't speak very good English, you know. And he's driving along, and Dave goes, you need to tell him to pull the car over. I can't breathe. Think I'm having a heart attack. And so halfway to the airport, we pull over. And I mean, and the poor Uber driver, man, he didn't understand what I was saying. I didn't understand what he was saying, but, you know, he pulled over. And it was right after the Brexit, and all I had was freaking euros, and I didn't know, dumb American, and he was like scowling at me. I was like, shit, hold on. But so he's waiting, and fortunately there was this doctor. He come over, and he saw us, and this was like 7 a.m, you know, and we're at this petrol station, and go over there, and Dave's coughing up this nasty shit and can't breathe, and I thought, man, he's about to have a freaking heart attack. And what it was symptoms from cardiac, I can't remember what, but like where there's fluid on your heart. And we thought he just had an upper respiratory infection. He'd kind of been sick for a few days, but, you know, he's just taking antibiotics and getting through. Well, this doctor calls 999, which I didn't know that was the code for emergency services over there. It's good to know if you go overseas, people. And so all this shit's happening, and mind you, we'd been up all night drinking, and we got up super early because we're trying to get out of town before this shit shuts down. We're like, we'll deal with the studio later. Like, this is a real thing. We need to leave. So I'm just chugging on the bottle thinking like, man, we got like a 9-hour flight. I'm about to, you know, just jump back on and go to sleep, you know? And so now I'm re-kick the buzz in from the night before, and I'm standing there, and Dave, you know, I'm just like, oh shit. So thought I was about to have to do like compressions and stuff on him on the side of the road, but the ambulance showed up in like just a matter of minutes, and the jolliest Englishman popped out of the back, you know, and I'm not going to murder the accent, but he was like, you know, good day, and got Dave in. And so there we are in an ambulance now instead of going to the airport, and we got all our luggage out of the Uber, and me and Jamie and Dave get in the back of the ambulance with the EMS, and they drive us to the hospital. So change the flights over back to the original date until we could figure out what the hell we're going to do. And so Dave's in the hospital, and he says, go back to work. So I get all the luggage, go back to the flat, and then go to the studio, and I'm there in time to start the day. So I work like normal with the engineer, and we're summing mixes down to tape and doing a few things. And I'm sending the mixes to Dave while he's in the hospital. And I didn't know yet, he's got earbuds. So when the doctors leave, he puts the earbuds in, he listens to this mix, and he sends it back to me with notes. And then we redo it, send it back. And we're doing this whole thing while he's in madness. And so we spent a few more days in London, and the whole city shuts down, you know, and it's very weird. And I got out of there, had to take like a 14 or 15 hour flight through the Netherlands. All, you know, it was a wild journey home. And Dave managed to get out of country. Him and Jamie, the embassy got him on the last flight out of the country. And he got back, and he was still pretty sick. And since that whole journey, he had some cardiac problems, which have now been reversed and fixed. They found a small hole in his heart, which they fixed that. And then he had cancer, which he just got his port out, and he's free of cancer. And you know, like, it's been a pretty grinding 5 years since COVID, you know. And that whole time was still managing to produce and make records. And so I would kind of be his avatar, if you will, in the studio engineering. I'd send him production bounces. He'd give me ideas. I'd get the band to do that. And then we kind of worked that way for a little while till he got back in shape enough to do it. But yeah, he said, you know, he's 2 years old now because he had a bone marrow transplant. So it completely resets your immune system. You got to get all new vaccines and stuff. But so from London, I mean, barely getting out. We have since gone back to Abbey Road and worked there again, to cut some strings and then cut a rock album. And but now we've moved everything to this facility in San Marcos. So Dave was, sorry if I'm rambling on too much, changing directions here, but Dave had a commercial spot in Austin, was moving it down to Wimberley because he was working in London half the time and he was working here half the time. So he just kind of had a really fancy commercial studio in his house. He'd shut the doors on the commercial building and was like, I'm only producing, a project a month or a couple projects a year that are really involved, and was able to just kind of do it at his home studio. And then half the time he was over there in London. And so when I entered in as an intern, and then through that whole journey, we started talking about me taking it over, and we had to grow it back up to what it is now. So as opposed to having a one building operation, now we've got, guys in the studio down there. I'm in my office here. Dave's got his mix space. We've got another tracking room in the B room. So, there's been a lot of new territory, uncharted territory, if you will, for me as a business owner, managing a few more people. But it goes back to building a good team, right? You got all your players, everybody's got strengths and weaknesses, and play to that, play to personality. So difference is, sometimes, in the artist world, sometimes people are a little more tender than, if you're playing a contact sport, but, otherwise it's exactly a parallel, man. You get out of it what you put into it, I think, So somehow Abbey Road and COVID and all that shit got intertangled and entwined in this whole 4-year journey, but we're here.
Well, first of all, obviously, I'm happy to know that David's okay now and that he has, sort of put that behind with cancer. Do you feel, for you personally, the fact that David was going through those things sort of made you step up your game to run things at the studio?
Absolutely. And I think large in part because I didn't have time to say, well, what if, or why, or can I do this? It wasn't even a question of oh, well, I don't know if I can do that. It was like, well, shit, I don't have any other choice, and I don't know. I mean, I think there's usually pretty much always another option, but I just didn't necessarily think about that or give myself that, I spent a lot more time in the hot seat, and he was still able to guide me and teach me even while being isolated because of his immune system, because of the cancer, through the good and the bad days. And so there was a whole bunch of wisdom. I mean, it was a crash course, if you will, accelerated program, just out of necessity. You sink or you swim. And I don't think it would have gone as well if I was 22 as opposed to 32 or 33, just because of the life experiences of being able to just take a breath and think about it, and not freak out. So, and it was inspiring as hell, man. I've had a lot of family members go through cancer stuff, so I kind of knew what to expect there. But, man, he didn't take any pain pills. He did it all with marijuana, THC-based tinctures and shit like that through fucking bone cancer, man. He did a few times, with some of the heavier stuff, but was always able to keep his wits, So it was mad respect, man, for him on that. And it's like when you go through something like that, or like in London, our intern, now engineer, he manages a B room, Ethan Lugbauer. That kid, he has a formal degree in audio engineering. So he's actually taught me quite a bit. I've taught him quite a bit. It's a great relationship, but he also helped Dave out last time they're in London. So we all have this whole, he got pretty sick there with freaking COVID, and then he got stuck for another 5 days. It's like, man, I'm never going back. But since then we've built this place and we cut strings here. It sounds, it's like we don't have to go back because we have the ability to do that here. But it's amazing the bond you make with somebody through that kind of shit, which when we tell the story now, it's funny, laughing. It's like, damn. And if you really go into the long form story, the small little details, it was a trip. But you don't think about it in the time because you're just handling the problem, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
then you realize, like,
You're,
he could have,
yeah.
he
You're
wasn't
trying to.
far from fucking dying, And
Oh shit. Yeah.
had we got on the freaking airplane, and then you're stuck in the air over the ocean, you know,
What do you
what
do?
then? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
So,
Fucked.
but I didn't care. I was half a bottle of Jameson deep, just like, woo, what are we doing? I can do this.
Like a proper rock star.
Right. Yeah. All my years of touring prepared me for that moment.
Yeah. It's kind of funny. Wait, looking back at the beginning of your career, did you ever see yourself here?
No, not even close. I dreamed that I'd be playing bass in a band and I'd get on a tour bus and we'd go play some shows and I would just, I didn't really know what other than that to expect. And, even the moment that we had songs on the radio that were charting on the Texas radio, it was like a little bit surreal. It didn't feel like, I guess I felt there to be like this big moment, like I have arrived kind of feeling, and there never was that,
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if how much of that, because I was always looking forward to the next thing, right? But I never even imagined being a producer. I remember people that really influenced me in my early music career, giving me advice and some things that I really listened to for whatever reason that helped me out. And so now I find it my duty to like pass that on as a producer. And so, I had, what is that term where, imposter syndrome kind of like, I'm not worthy, and then I got over that, about playing, but then same thing with producing, then I realized, well, shit, I couldn't have produced 10 years ago because the way that I produce is through guiding the team and the experience that I have to give to these guys and help the bands out beyond just making a record, if they're signing a record deal or trying to book a show or, something happens and they need some help navigating, I help guide them through all that. And I think that is my gift to them because that was given to me early in my career, so I couldn't have done that without a lot of the experience that I have.
During this whole process, did you ever have any doubt? Did it ever creep in?
Yeah. I think early on, there's a little bit of naivety in, like, you have to be a little bit disillusioned to jump into music and try to be a rock star. Like, there is some disillusion there and energy. I think that if I tried to start it now, all the shit that was required to do it, I probably wouldn't do it. But, but without having done that, hell yeah, I was, I didn't have any doubt early on. As I got a little older, there's a few times I think I was approaching burnout that I started to have some doubts because of the sacrifice of not having a huge nest egg, and I finally hit a spot where I kind of did have some stuff, and then this move sacrificed a lot of that. But it's all for the bigger picture. So, I mean, there's a few times this past year, honestly, that I started to have some doubts. And then something would turn up. And I think that was just me getting tired, of the weight. But now it's like anything, you just keep putting one foot forward. And now those feelings have passed. And I'm like, well, we made it through a year. Okay, we can make it through another year. And that was just on the move to the new facility. But before this, as a player, I don't think I really had any doubts. I mean, the nervousness before shows, that was always a thing. Very similar to like before a game, you get really excited. But
that just means
feeling,
that you care, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That goes back to another thing. I mean, shit, how many people came to those late football games, dude, in the playoffs and stuff? That's a big crowd of people out there,
Yeah, that is kind of surreal. I mean, that's what I was thinking about earlier as well. But it kind of seems that from 7th grade, or well, in my case, like from 8th grade, you sort of slowly start getting that getting your mind trained to see people go out there and watch you.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, when you first start in eighth, well, in my case, I started in eighth grade. I moved to Crane in seventh grade, but it was a bit surreal the first time I ever went to a game. I remember, like, I didn't even know the rules of the game. Like, I didn't even know when to go in. Every time we would switch from defense to offense, they would have to tell me to go in. I would just be chilling on the sideline, and yeah, I didn't know. You see, I was in seventh grade, and I moved there. I think it was after the Christmas break. So then, as seventh grade was soon to be over, I remember, I think it was in science class with Miss, forget her name, the curly-headed teacher in
Mm-hmm.
seventh grade.
The
Anyway,
redhead.
yeah, yeah. There, somebody asked me, I think it was Anthony Zuniga or Ben Sutherland. He's the one that came up to me. He's like, "Hey, are you gonna play football next year?" I was like, "Yeah, sure, fuck it." So then, of course, I mean, starting in eighth grade, it's a new sport to me. Of course, I grew up playing, football, soccer, you know. So American football was like a completely new thing to me. So obviously, it was very bizarre to me the first game that we had. There was actually people watching us. It wasn't a lot of people, but there was people. But you make that transgression slowly, and then by the time you get to varsity, that's like when when the lights start to shine, and it's not just the parents, it's the whole community. And of course, I mean, I still remember. I think there wasn't one single game where I wasn't nervous before the game. You know, before the kickoff. It was always that same adrenaline, that same excitement of going out there to perform. And I don't know. I mean, obviously you perform for a crowd, whereas we were performing, to represent school, the team, whatever it may be. So the crowd kind of becomes uh, background noise, if you want to call it that. But as an artist, obviously you actually do have a direct relationship with the crowd, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
A
mean,
lot of
you're there for the
times,
crowd.
that's I think part of the journey too. Everybody's got a different path, right? And things have changed immensely since like TikTok and social media and stuff. But, we started out just playing in bars. So in a sense, like you're just there, there's people listening, but they could give two shits if it's you or the jukebox playing, and sometimes they'll even heckle you, and talk shit. So I found this light here. Some band left it. That's what I've been using, and it's ringing out on me. Okay, but yeah. But it's like you do all that as a rite of passage. You learn 3 hours of music, which is a shitload of music, to learn to just go play, and it's hard. And you study and you get together as a band, and part of that process, through all of that, you're getting better, right? And the excitement of like having a paid gig, is cool. And just shit, sometimes even just go drink beer for free at the bar, like that's cool, And but then we wanted to write, and so we were always writing original music, and then we start working those into the sets, and then people start really liking them. Then you kind of be like, okay, well, these are the good songs. Let's go make a record. And then after that happens, then like that real connection starts to happen. I mean, the whole time we're like playing these places, and we're basically trying to just keep everybody entertained enough to stick around and drink one more beer, and hopefully they like it and they'll throw some money in the tip jar. But eventually you start seeing like, well, you're out there hustling fans. You're trying to like impress these people so they like your music, so they'll buy your CD, so they'll buy you a round of beers. Then they start buying rounds of beers to the band. Then the bar loves you because you're making the bar money. And so it kind of feeds itself. But the whole time you're forcing yourself into situations to play and get better, and practice and play and get better, And so it gives, I mean, I do love that. And I do miss gigging a lot. I've got too many responsibilities to just hit the road now. But it was like, a very pivotal moment to get to the point where people show up to see the band, right? So I don't know. By the time that happened, like, you get really used to playing in front of people, but you still get fucking nervous before every show, you know? Even the small ones, like, they're still just like that. Like, okay, let's go. We're playing on a sidewalk. Who cares, you know?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. That's cool. Now, obviously things have changed a lot since when you were touring with the band. Now you have studio and it's not just any studio. I mean, I was looking at the website and obviously there's a lot of big names there.
Mm-hmm.
You have had the opportunity to work with, some major players like Colter Wall. I mean, what was that like?
Honestly, pretty surreal looking back on it now. At the time, I hadn't really heard much of him, and I told my band I was in that I was going to work with Colter, and they're like, "What? What are you like? Who?" And so, and at the time, I was still interning, on that first album, but the most recent one, I engineered that, and it was cool because that was probably one of the better known artists at the time that I had worked with, and dude, they were the coolest, most humble guys that I've ever worked with. It was honestly a very easy day in the office because they wanted things a particular way, and they came in and they just performed it, and they sat out and smoked some cigarettes and talked shit and went in there and worked and left. And I mean, it was a very enjoyable process. I've since used the Pat, the guitar player and producer of the project, I've used him. He's out of Nashville. I've sent him some tracks to cut steel on, and the harmonica player, Jake Groves, lives in, I think, Georgia, but that's probably wrong. Somewhere out there. And those guys can fly in work. So not only did they come in and, it was just like any other session, except that the guys are super freaking talented, and they've been touring together for so long that they're super tight. And now I've built a relationship where I can, work with them. And so that was cool. It's been a nice perk of that, I guess, but it kind of runs together.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I think the first time I heard him, it was one of those harsh songs that he has. But the first time I heard him, I thought I listened to him over Spotify, and the first image that came to my head was somebody that would look like Chris Christopherson or somebody like that. And then I Googled him and I was like, how does he have that voice?
Oh, and it's all there, man. He finally wore headphones the last time he recorded. He just sits down with his guitar and plays and sings. And when that's the take, that's the take. There's no frills or nothing, man. I mean, it's like, it's a real deal Holyfield, man.
But shit, does he write his songs or?
Yeah. Yeah. And the one I did, there was some standards, some old cowboy standards that he did, but he's a writer too.
Oh shit. I mean, where does he get his inspiration? I mean, have you ever talked to him about those things? Because some of his songs are like, fuck.
No, I didn't, because I was engineering, so I'm kind of like always focused on that. And the little conversation we did have was just, he'd talk about his ranch up in Canada. And, I think people harp on him for not being like a real deal cowboy. And I think that's just people talking shit, because the guy's about as real as they come. I mean, I don't think he grew up necessarily ranching, but he, for whatever reason, found his calling doing that. And I mean, they're out there working cows all the time up in Saskatchewan, So that seems real enough to me. But he was kind of trashing. He wasn't trashing, but he was just kind of poking fun at Yellowstone, some of the stuff and I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, well, this cow gave birth to a calf and it hit the ground and jumped up and ran off. And it was like a 6-month-old calf that ran off. And I was like, oh, okay. Whatever. But he laughs. He's like, but they made me a lot of money because they played my music, so.
Yeah. Wow. Who have been some of the artists that have continued to inspire you?
This band, Silverado, they just changed their name from Mike and the Moon Pies. And when I was in this rock band, those guys they were a pretty big deal, but I always thought Mike and the Moon Pies was kind of a silly name, but I love Moon Pies, and I didn't really know them at the time. But I just thought, that's a weird name, you know? And they'd been a band for like 10 or 12 years at that point. And I remember Adam saying, "Oh, these guys, y'all need to do what they're doing. They're working their butts off." And I'm like, "Well, you know, I don't know how to do what they're doing. That, you know, how do we get those people to help us out or whatever?" And those guys, I've done a couple albums with them, and they're the hardest working people. I mean, they've changed their name to Silverado, and their current album is self-titled, and it sounds incredible. I really enjoyed working on that project, but I'm always blown away with those dudes and their abilities to tour 300 shows a year. And you know, several of them have kids and families, and I mean, they're making it work. And then they come into the studio and they're just so damn, like, they're fun, but they're so professional and perfectionists, and they just work out all the parts. And, you know, those guys really had a pretty big impact on me as just an engineer and a producer. You know, Adam is a great producer as well, and I've learned a lot from him. And that's how we met Dave, through the Yellow Dog. Was we chose Adam to produce our record, and he brought us to Yellow Dog. High Desert Queen, if you're into rock and roll, man, that's a fun one. One of my closest friends, Phil Hook, he's a drummer for them, but him and I have been on a bunch of records together, producing and playing. And they came off of a 30-day European tour last year, and they went into the studio. Like, they came home for 8 days to the States and kind of rested, and then they came into the studio for a week, and there's this album out called Palm Reader, and I recorded them, and we wrote 4 songs in the studio, and they recorded 4 songs. And so 4 of the songs on the album didn't exist before the band walked in there. I mean, they just started jamming, you know. They'd wake up in the morning, you know, and have some coffee, we'd make breakfast, and they would just jam. And then the next day we would listen to the jam and be like, okay, here's the part. And then we'd work that up, and then the vocalist would work on the vocal melody. He came back later and sang it, but, you know, we'd always have one song that day that they've been touring. So we would record that one, and then we would jam. And those guys, man, so it was mixed by Daniel Leiden in Sweden. And dude, I'm proud of that album because of the moment. You know, it's one of those things where, like, I think I do love the album and we've got a lot of good feedback from it, but part of the magic there is that this band was tight from touring, and they just came in and it's like they're just playing, man. They created this in that moment, and that's the best version of that you can hear, is what they just, you know, the raw energy of that, you know, it's powerful.
Wow. I love it.
So that might be my favorite album.
That's nice. That's great. Every time I ask you a question about what you're doing now, you know, obviously you're not, or maybe you are seeing yourself in the screen, but, you know, I love it the way you light up. It's amazing to see.
Oh, thanks. I try not to look
That's
at myself in the screens. I'd be like the weirdo. Like,
yeah. But yeah, it's pretty cool, man. I like that. Now, obviously, I've been listening to a lot of the songs that you have on your playlist. You know, a lot of them, you know, they're great. I like the rhythm for some of them, obviously. Now, you mentioned to me that is it your girlfriend or your wife?
my girlfriend.
Okay. Yeah, she's also an artist. So talk to me about that experience that you have had. I guess, does she make her music in Yellow Dog Studio?
She does. She actually moved down here from Colorado and did her first EP with us. And that's where we first met. Was I just played bass and engineered, you know, and then she moved down to Texas, and it's been about 3 years, you know, and we kind of ran into each other, started talking again.
Yeah.
And now we live together, you know, we're deeply in love, man. It's beautiful. It's been awesome, man. And she has written a 10-song album. And so we've got her second album that she just has to sing, and it's a totally different trip than the first one. But this is my first time ever to be in love with somebody and also be able to, like, make art and music with them. So
Wow.
it's been, and we've played some shows together. This past summer, we did a small little, like, 10-day run up to Colorado. Played, you know, 5 or 6 shows out there. and just to be on stage, played Green Hall here in New Braunfels, sold out shows a couple times, just opening for people, but doing like the acoustic thing. And it's really cool. It's like a whole nother level of experience in music is doing it with somebody you love. I never thought that. I always envied the couples that could do it, you know, but I was always in a band and always on the road, so my relationships kind of teetered around that. And but this one, you know, it's the first one that ever felt right, and I think part of that is a connection in music. You know, we're just sitting around passing the guitar, always music on the jukebox, always on the record player. So it's beautiful, man.
Wow, man. Congrats.
Thank you.
So on that same note, I've been listening to one of her songs, Roll On. Man,
Yeah,
what a great fucking song.
I'm gonna tell her you said that. She loves that.
Yeah. I have added that one to my playlist, Roll On, and also is it August Nights, I think?
Yeah.
Great songs. So tell me a little bit about what was the inspiration about Roll On? It kind of, I mean, I've been listening to it a lot of times, and I was trying to think, is this song about Casey, or like, what is it about?
So she wrote that song. She tells me that she wrote that song daydreaming about me. But we I don't think we had met yet when she wrote that tune. But
Okay.
she literally wrote it about. She goes, yeah, I was just dreaming about the love of my life when I wrote that, and so I'll take that at face value. And so yeah, she says that song's about me. Even though she didn't write it about me, we didn't know each other when she wrote it. So, but yeah, I think it's a beautiful tune. It's really cool when we play it together. I just bow the big bass and she does her thing. Her voice is amazing, man. We played at Green Hall, opening for I think Whitey Morgan, and there's a big old crowd of rednecks, dude, in there, and they were loving her, man. We're killing it. And she was like, oh, I'm gonna just do the last one by myself. And she set her guitar down and she sang all a cappella, just all voice, and she starts stomping and clapping and stomping and clapping and getting the whole bar into it, you know. And then she just starts singing this Janis Joplin cover of Mercedes-Benz or whatever. I'm just like, man, she just killing it. She goes, well, I don't know why somebody. I'm like, you got the it factor. Like,
Yeah.
she's so sweet, so humble, and but man, she's a little girl. She voice is freaking huge, bro. It's really fun to watch, man. And to
Wow,
play.
it must be really something special.
It is. And she gets me out of my head, you know. She's encouraged me to finish some of the songs that I've been writing and singing, and I kind of quit writing for a little while after Dick's Hat Band, and I've found that fire again on that side of things. So she's really been a beautiful inspiration for a lot of that. Just, you know, giving me the confidence to be like, no, you stop making excuses, you know, kind of thing. So
Right on, man. I mean, that's the way it's supposed to be, right?
it is. Partners, you know, that's it.
Yeah. Wow. 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 You know, it has been, you know, quite a joy right here, you know, listening to all the stories, you know, you coming up as a young artist, going through some challenges, you know, facing, you know, your challenges and creating a lot of beautiful things and beautiful memories. You get a chance now to sort of impact, or you have access to a lot of people, a lot of artists, a lot of young and upcoming artists. What would be some advice that you feel you might have needed whenever you were starting your career that you may want to give to one of those young artists coming up?
I think number one rule would probably be to listen and then just slow down, because I think about a lot of things, and sometimes it's easy to focus on the negative aspects of things, or to focus on what somebody else has and what you don't have. But I think to relish in the moment and to listen. Because you think about some of the greatest music that's ever, some of the most timeless albums, right? Back in those days, there wasn't music everywhere. You know, now you get gas at the gas pump, there's music playing, there's advertisements. You go into every store, there's music playing. I mean, you kind of heard what was on the radio, but otherwise people spend a lot of time alone in their thoughts, you know, And I think it's easy to get inspired now because you kind of hear the same pop hook and the same pop melody, and it's a science, it's a formula. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of peer-reviewed scientific studies on the psychology behind a catchy hook and a catchy melody. But I think the more classic tunes are people alone in their thoughts and their feelings, and they're listening to themselves and listening to the environment around them. And so if I had to give any advice to a young aspiring artist, it would be to just listen. And when you find something that you like, when you find an artist that you love, oh, you're a big Post Malone fan. Okay, well, who inspired Post Malone? Okay, and then go down and who inspired that person, and like listen and study and find their inspiration and study that, you know, and just be a student of the craft, I think is the best advice I could give. And to make a big deal out of your wins, you know, that's in anything, not just in music. I keep, you know, it's like realizing when you've got somewhere, because like I said, you know, oh, we got a song on the radio. Well, there's no like moment, you know, it's not like, aha, you know, we got a song on the radio. I mean, it feels that way, but it's easy to get caught up in the next step, you know? So simply put, I think just slow down and listen, you know?
Yeah. What have you learned about yourself?
Man, I don't know. I talk too much. No, I
Definitely not.
That's what have I learned about myself? My buddy Will Boring one time said, and he's a music producer as well, but he was like, you know, I love that you always say, nah, fuck that, man, I'm not doing that. And then you sit there for about 30 seconds, you're like, all right, I'm in, let's go. And if there's anything I've learned about myself, I do enjoy doing hard things. I just, you know, it's like, you asked me earlier if I ever had any doubts. And if there's anything I've learned about myself, it's that like, if I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it, you know, and sometimes that's been a detriment, but most of the time it works out in the end, you know, and that's like a positive, that's definitely a positive attribute that I feel in myself. But this game and this journey has definitely taught me that, and not even knocking the people I know that went on to do other things. It's not easy to do music full time. And there's been times where I always had another chore or task, but, yeah, it's just don't quit. That's what I've learned. It's like, oh, well, you made it in the music business. I think it's just because I didn't quit the music business. But in that vein, man, not to sidetrack, but I tell people, ask me, like, what do you do? You know? And there was an artist here, and it's why I sell farm equipment. I was like, no, you don't. That's how you pay your bill. Like, what do? You're an artist. You're a poet. You have 3 books of poems right there. You don't sell farm equipment. You're a poet. You know? That was a random, I don't know why I just thought of that, but, so I tell people that all the time when they come in to play music, because they don't feel relevant, like they have to do this 40 hours a week, you know? It's like you sing a song, you're a songwriter. You write poems, you're a poet. You don't have to tell people you're paint houses for a living, you drive a dump truck, that's cool. But nah, you're a poet, or, you know, whatever other artistic endeavor that people do. You know, people have hobbies, man. You can be your hobby, I guess, if that makes sense.
It does. Casey Jones from Yellow Dog Studios, everybody. Thanks a lot, brother. What are you working on now?
I am in the process of mixing some albums right now. So I've got a couple country albums and a bluegrass album and 1 rock album. So getting those things knocked out. And then next month I got some projects coming in to produce. So
great. Is there some artists that people can take a look at that they have released some new albums coming out of your studio?
Man, yeah, Dakota Gallivan, actually. We just released a rock project from him, I think today. it sounds like 1970s Skinnerd, so that's been a fun one. Otherwise, I've got a lot in queue getting ready to come out. So if you check out yellowdogstudios.com, we can try to keep that updated. I have a website, caseyjohns.com as well. Slightly outdated, but you can find a playlist of my work up there and stuff. So
Yeah, and I'll go ahead and make sure to put those into the description as well, so that people can find those things. But Casey, if there's anything else that you want to share before we go to sleep.
Man, what time is it there?
Here it's 10:40.
All right, just in time for bedtime. Man, I appreciate you, Daniel. We got to catch up sometime. You got an incredible story, so I wanted to not derail the thing, but there's so many questions I got to ask you about some of your experiences and how that's impacted you and raising your kids and just becoming the man that you are. But I hope that you can tell that story, or maybe I'll start a podcast and I'll ask you these, some of these questions. But I appreciate you having me on, man. But you need to tell your story.
Absolutely. Count on it. Well, we can do it again and maybe in a couple of months, and we can go a little bit deeper into my story. But it has been an absolute blast having you on, learning from you, hearing, just seeing how much joy you get out of doing your thing. It's something that I truly admire. I wish I could say this about all the people that I've come through, over life, but it's always a very small group of people that are able to find their passion and are able to, push their own boundaries and create something of beauty, like the way that you're doing it. So, I keep my ears open to continue to listen to some of the artists that are coming out of the studio. And absolutely, man, we're gonna do this again, as many times as we have time, or as many times as we want, for sure, man.
Awesome. I look forward to it, man. And keep kicking ass at life, bro. I'm proud of you. Look forward to hearing your story, man.
Absolutely, man. All right, then. Well, thanks a lot, buddy. Bye, everybody.
See ya.